From Aotea Great Barrier Island, Aotearoa New Zealand, welcome to Small Island Big Ideas, an ongoing festival of conversations and events created to take Aotea Great Barrier Island and possibly the world forward. I'm Tim Higham.
And I'm Sandy Burgham, and together with our friend Bree Biederman, we are the Small Island Big Ideas team. It's 2024, and Small Island Big Ideas is going global. Thanks to input from many of those in our own community, we've scoured the globe to find other small islands, similar in size to our own, who've had a big idea that has led to some sort of radical reinvention.
We're interested in how other small islands are facing the future. How have they acted on a big idea that's transformed their island community in a positive way? We'll be sharing those conversations and learnings on this podcast over the next few months, one small island at a time. So let's get started.
The island of Eigg, Scotland is a true tiny island. It has a population of around 115, a land area mass of 30 square kilometres, and is a 1-hour ferry ride from the mainland. This is a story of a tiny island community who had the gumption and wherewithal to actually purchase the island outright from a private landowner. The island had been facing issues around unemployment, infrastructure, electricity, connectivity, and dilapidated housing. But by literally buying the island and forming a community trust in partnership with the Highland Council and the Scottish Wildlife Trust, they have been able to navigate and create their own destiny. This is an inspiring story of transformation and what a small number of people are able to do when they work together. So, hello Maggie, hello Lucy from Down Under.
Hiya.
I'm Sandy, this is Hannah, our resident Scottish lass on our island. And so it's 7 o'clock in the evening over there, right?
It is.
Yep, 7 in the morning. Thanks, Hannah, for getting out of bed so early.
Easy, but not a morning person.
Okay, so look, what an interesting story the island of Eigg is. We're fascinated, quite a different story for us. And we would love to know about a little bit about, well, really, I guess the whole story is about a community buyout. This is a true tiny island. And we'd love to hear, maybe Maggie, you start about the reason there was a community buyout in the first place, and what is a community buyout. We're fascinated on how much it costs to buy your own island, and then we'll talk later on about what, the consequences of the buyout. So, Maggie, over to you.
Well, I moved to Eigg in 1976 at the behest of the then owner, a guy called Keith Schellenberg.
Right.
And I have to say, people were incredibly welcoming when we arrived on Eigg. And I think that was mainly because the population had dropped to quite a low level and folk were genuinely worried about, the number of children, the school might close, etc., etc. So the first few years were very good fun. The guy that owned the place, he was quite charismatic in some ways. But then on the other hand, he seemed to have a real problem in actually giving people any kind of security. Yeah. And that's really it's hard to put it in a nutshell because it took years, all this. And lots of different things happened. But basically it got to the point where, there was a court case with his ex-wife. Everything, sort of nothing happened on the island while that was in progress. There was all kinds of nonsense going on. And then eventually the island was put up for sale, and we kind of had a notion about a community buyout, but there wasn't the confidence, there wasn't, a structure for doing it. So basically what happened was Schellenberg bought the island back off his ex-wife. And that's when we made a vague attempt at kind of explaining to him, what our problems were, i.e. folk didn't have leases on houses, they didn't have leases on farms, businesses, and we were trying to build a new community hall because he wouldn't let us use the old one. So we wanted a site for that. We wanted him to sign off a crofter was willing to release a piece of ground for the local housing association to build affordable housing. Really important.
Yeah.
So we explained all this to him. He said yes, 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 and then he went away and did absolutely nothing about it. And yeah, we all went back to, thinking there has to be a different way. I'll jump another few years there. The island got sold to a mysterious German artist called Maruma, and we were sort
Start of a good story.
So at this point, we'd actually done quite a lot of community workshops where we spent a whole winter, and we had workshops, and we split into small groups because big meetings, some people speak a lot, some people don't speak at all. These small groups of people, we sort of talked about every aspect of life on Eigg, from housing to agriculture to tourism, blah blah blah, and from that we kind of, we had all those results written down. So when Maruma appeared in a helicopter one day and said he wanted to live on Eigg and he wanted to be part of the community, we organized a meeting and we gave him the results of our workshops, just to tell, to show him what Eigg community wanted. Yeah. So that was all good. We thought, cautiously optimistic kind of idea. Time went on. There was all kinds of weird stuff going on, like somebody representing Pavarotti said he wanted to build a 200-bed opera school. I mean, it was all a bit ridiculous, a bit surreal, actually. Eventually,
it is anything like this one, it definitely wouldn't have gone down well as a suggestion.
Do you remember, Hannah, when there was a rumor that Cher was going to come? Remember that? Like, oh my God, Cher is going to buy.
Oh, well, why wouldn't she?
I don't think she would really fit in. But anyway,
could you imagine her down at the Clarice Club having a pint? Like,
anyway, keep going, Maggie. So look.
Well, there was kind of notions. There was we weren't totally committed to the island as a whole. Wasn't totally committed to the buyout. There were still folk that were saying, better the devil you know, and all this sort of stuff. And there were rumors that, I can't remember who exactly might have bought Eigg, but anyway. But what happened next was members of the press. Egg's always been, Schellenberg used to court the press, so he had a lot of publicity. So the press have watched the island constantly for a long time. And Maruma was reported to have been investigated for a 1.6 million fraud, which was what he paid for Eigg. And we came to the conclusion that he was trailing around Europe trying to raise funds to do whatever. Anyway, people were getting more and more committed to the idea of a community buyout. We'd spoken to the Highland Council, our local regional council, who said they would be interested in being a part of a buyout. We'd also spoken to the Scottish Wildlife Trust, who has had a presence on Eigg for a long time, looking after the wildlife aspects. And so we decided to set up an organisation which became the Isle of Eigg Heritage Trust. Right. And that organisation, and this is all, lots of discussion with the community. You can imagine we had endless meetings.
Yeah.
And we decided we wanted to be this three member organisation, because, it's partly was a lack of confidence, I suppose, but also we like the idea of other organisations being part of our remit. So it all came to a head when land agents Knight Frank turned up in a helicopter one day, and they said they were here to look at the dry rot in the big house, but they had an aerial photographer.
Some helicopter resistance, but keep going.
Yeah.
Spidey senses are tingling.
But they had an aerial photographer on board, so we reckoned that you know, the island was about to go up for sale. And it did us a favour in one way because, you know, we sort of, we told the press what we thought were going on. They started mithering the land agents, who eventually had to admit that that's what was going on. But it gave us time to tighten up our ideas, put out, you know, start thinking about fundraising ideas, which we did.
Saw it coming on the horizon. That's
So
funny. I have a question, Maggie. How did you go about electing who was going to be on that board, on that trust?
Well, the Highland Council, it's local councillors who represent the council.
Right.
The Scottish Wildlife Trust chooses who will represent them.
Their representative, yeah.
And it's usually the whoever is the, you know, the manager for this area. And then on Eigg, the directors of the trust are elected by the community. And we can move on to that later, just how the structure sets up. But yeah, so we launched a fundraising appeal. We had this, I mean, there's photographs of the day where we all looked absolutely terrified. We had a lot of help from the Highland Council's PR manager, who guided me through how to deal with the press quite significantly, I would say. But he organised, you know, there were TV cameras, there were half the world were there. So that's how the appeal was launched. There was a closing date. By that closing date, we'd not raised, the island was up for sale for 2 million. We'd not raised anywhere near that, but what we had done was getting in.
That sounds so cheap. I mean, that sounds so cheap to buy an
Well, we didn't think so.
No, but like it does. I don't know what's that in New Zealand dollars, but I'm thinking
It's about 4 million.
I mean,
just over 4 million.
It sounds really good for a fund.
This was in 1996.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
I imagine,
but
I know.
The whole idea that it's doable.
You can barely get a house for that now out here.
Absolutely right. So you were thinking you've got to raise £2 million, right?
But that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
I don't think we were ever going to do the 2 million because we thought he'd bought it for 1.5 million.
Right.
And he'd done absolutely sod all with it while he had it. So anyway, that's another story. We'd had an independent valuation done where they had valued it at 1.2 million. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but there were lots of ups and downs and round the houses. But by whatever, sometime in 96, by the closing date for the sale, we'd actually had raised 1.2 million.
And how did you that's what we're interested in. How did you get the money together? I mean, it's obviously more than a whip around at the pub.
Well, it was amazing, the sort of reaction we got. I think, you know, land reform in Scotland was just becoming a thing. So there was a lot of interest in it. And we had people just sending, from pound notes in the post to £30 to, you know, sometimes it was a few hundred. But what clinched it was we'd hoped to get money from the National Lottery. They turned us down because they said it didn't benefit the wider general public enough. It only benefited people on Eigg, which, I mean, there was a lot of political shenanigans going on at that time.
Yeah.
Anyway, a mystery woman, a benefactor, appeared on the scene. And originally she was going to give us 500,000. But when she discovered that the lottery weren't going to support us, she upped a donation to 750,000, and that, along with gift aid, made it £1 million. So that's how the 1.2 million bid that we put in was possible.
That's so inspiring.
Is who the mystery woman?
Oh yes.
That was her only. That
anonymous.
Was the only thing she insisted upon, was that she remained anonymous.
Maybe it was.
Wow.
Maybe it was.
I was about to say, what if it was Cher? What if it was
I can assure you it wasn't. I had lots of conversations with her on the phone, and it wasn't Cher.
Oh, she's a very
it was
mysterious
nobody
woman,
famous
Maggie.
at all.
I have to say that I've known Maggie for 30-something years, and I think it's probably one of the only things I don't know about Maggie is nobody else knows either.
One secret I've managed to keep.
Oh, good on you.
All we know is the benefactor is female, and that's absolutely extent of it.
That's very
good on
interesting
you, Maggie.
for us. Another initiative I'm involved in our island is actually a sort of philanthropic movement as well. And we also had, for something we put a call out for, had a mysterious benefactor who was female. So there's something in that. Anyway, so you bought it. Let's cut to
No, we didn't. Our bid was turned down. They didn't.
Oh.
1.2 million wasn't enough. So go back to the drawing board. So we
after
did.
all that,
we continued raising money. We weren't put off by this. What we did do was a bit of market spoiling. I mean, there were people turning up in helicopters, and they were driving around the island. And what we did was we managed to get our postman to park his van in the middle of the road, so they couldn't get past. And then we invited them into this house, in fact, for a cup of tea. And then we told them, basically, they were being led astray. They were being given the wrong information. And if they bought egg, they'd be doing it against the wishes of the community. And I think we did manage to put a few people off by doing.
Hannah, that's the sort of shit we'd do in the island, eh? It's great. We'd be so into that.
Pitchfork.
Right, there's a bit of anarchy involved.
Oh, for sure. Well, you've got to have a little bit on an island, I think. You're a little bit alone to yourself. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, so we carried on fundraising.
Yeah.
The following April, we discovered that Maruma had borrowed money off a Hong Kong businessman, a relatively small amount of money in the scale of things, but he'd used Egg as security. And through that, they took over the sale of the island. His lawyers were quite happy to accept our offer of 1.5 million, but they made us wait a week and re-advertise it and go through a process. And that's the only thing we did keep secret from residents, was we didn't want that news to get out and somebody to come in with a higher bid. So on the 4th of April, 1997, we'd set up a phone tree in advance. And somebody from Egg was in Edinburgh at the solicitors. They phoned me and said, that's it. They've accepted our offer. It's ours. Wow. So everybody on Egg found out. We needed to tell everybody on Egg before they heard it on the news, which is, it was a close thing. And then we had a big party.
Oh my God, amazing.
And so, look, we'll talk about, we're fascinated with Emma's notes. And just on, I think, a question you asked before, Hannah, one of the things in terms of the trust we understand is that there's 6 directors and 4 are from the Residents Association, 1 from the Highland Council, 1 for the Scottish Wildlife Trust. It is kind of a theme, and now that the conversations we're having with islands around the world about inviting people from outside the island to contribute, but still having the majority, still having the residents themselves, like a community council, navigating the future, or the desired future. So that's interesting. We'd love to now turn the conversation to, this is because what we're understanding is from that trust, you've created 3 different entities that address 3 different needs on the island, one being electricity, one being construction and housing, and one being, I guess, trading. So maybe, I don't know, Lucy, do you want to climb in, or either of you, talk to us about that structure and what the activities are under those 3 different organisations?
Yeah, so if you think of the Isle of Egg Heritage Trust as owning the island and all that involves, so the buildings, the land, the scour, and so on and so forth. And while there are some properties on the island which are owned outright by individuals, a good 99% of it is owned by the Isle of Egg Heritage Trust and is leased out either as residential properties. So there's 10 houses which people live in. There's 3 farms, and there's 22 crofts, which are leased out. So
croft is like a small farmlet, is it?
Like a small holding, yeah. Yes, like a small holding. So and then there's a wee bit of ground that is owned by Egg Trading, which is one of the subsidiaries of the Isle of Egg Heritage Trust. And egg trading is responsible for building, owning, and managing a lamrig, which is a building which contains the shop, the cafe bar, a craft shop, some business units. It also runs a shower block, because next door there's some camping pods. So basically, things which are around, trading activity. And there's various reasons why it's a subsidiary. One of which is in order for it to be able to generate income to support itself and be able to vote up any extra funds it might have to the parent charity. It's VAT registered, which is a very nerdy thing to be useful for. But it also means that should anything happen in terms of trading activity, then the parent charity is always protected, because it's a separate bunch of activity and bunch of work. And so that egg trading was set up quite early on after the buyout first happened, to build the first lamrig building, which was half the size of the one that we opened last year, and was the first project that the trust delivered on taking community ownership. They were very proud of it then, but they're even more proud of what we have today. Anyway, that's another story again. So egg trading operates sort of trading activities. So additionally, at the moment, it runs the wood fuel company. So it harvests and chops up and distributes wood fuel, and some tourism activity. In 2006-07, I think it was, conversations started happening around one of the objectives that I'm sure Maggie and her cohorts back in the mid-90s talked about, which was trying to provide electricity for Eigg, because Eigg is not connected to the mainland grid. And so before what became Eigg Electric, each house was independently powered by its own generator. Yes. So far from being a quiet island, as you walked through the idyllic island, all you'd hear is of a generator. Or if you walk past Maggie and Wes's house, to be fair, they had the tiniest hydro in the world. So you just heard her swoosh, 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 swoosh.
Oh, wow. I was reading last night, I was reading some really impressive stuff about how Egg's one of the first islands in the world to be 100% renewable. You got lots of really great press for that. That's amazing. So when did that?
It was because of the technology. It wasn't to be. It was the first time that the three technologies, wind, solar, and solar, had been actually joined together in one
interesting
thing.
Because if there's anything in Scotland that you can rely on, is the sun's probably not shining, but the wind or the rain definitely is going.
Well, you'd be surprised, actually. The PVs are more useful than you think.
Oh, that's amazing. Oh, I'll need to move to Eigg when I go back then, because in Paisley it was definitely never, it's always raining.
So Eigg Electric was switched on in 2008, and at that point, in order to switch on Eigg Electric, that was £1.6 million worth of investment. One of the biggest components was actually laying a grid, because none of the houses are connected to one another. So in order to be able to distribute electricity around the whole island, a grid had to be laid. And then there was 4 wind turbines, one big hydro and a couple of small hydros. And at that time, 10 kilowatts worth of photovoltaic. We've now got 170, is that right, Maggie? Something like that. Yeah. Anyway, in February 2008, electricity was switched on, and I think it was then and remains the most amazing stuff. Never, ever, ever take electricity for granted. Especially 24-hour clean power that you just turn a light on and turn a switch and it comes on. Because before then, generators, apart from the noise, you had to go and get the diesel, you had to take it from where it arrived, you had to fill up the generator. It was noisy, it was expensive, it was dirty, it was smelly, and it would run out.
They broke down quite a lot, Lucy, as well.
And I wonder, because there's a phenomenon I've observed here, and I wonder if it's the same on Eigg. Not just one thing will go wrong at once. So when your generator breaks, it'll also there'll be something wrong with the water line, and maybe the car battery's decided to die, so you can't go get more fuel. Is that the same thing on Eigg?
Yeah, more or less.
Kind of happens in freeze. Like you don't just get one crisis, you've got them all.
It also happens that I know that when people move to the island, everything happens in the first 2 years. And I always say to people, it's just testing you. If you're the metal, it's just testing you, right?
Yeah.
You're like, keep going.
So Egg Electric was established, and so it and Egg Trading, all the directors of those two companies are taken from the local community as well. So given that we're now 115 people, but you can imagine back in the day when the buyout first happened, there was 65, was it, Maggie, or 63?
Wow.
64 people, that's all.
64 people.
Yeah.
And that includes babies and, senior citizens. So when you take, people out at either end, trying to run, and even now with 115 people, when you take out the oldies and the youngies, the number of people in the middle who are available to be directors and staff, all these companies is quite limited. So we're all very busy. So I don't know whether it's the same way you are, but when people ask, what do you do in the winter? We just say we have meetings, because we have them all year round. There's more in the winter.
I think one of the things, the commonalities, and is that I think to live on Great Barrier, where we do, everybody makes a contribution to the community in some way. In some way, you're making a contribution to the community. So
yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the housing and the construction. So our understanding is that when what you inherited was a lot of dilapidated houses, because the previous owners had not invested in being a good landlord. So how have the housing thing's of great interest to us, because we have a housing shortage on the island in terms of accommodation that people can even rent. So talk to us about that and how you may be managing supply would be interesting too.
Well, I think we've gone full circle with that. We set up Egg Construction back in '98, I think, and that was to, we were doing renovations to the houses to make them a bit more fit for purpose.
Yeah.
Which we managed to do with All Island Labour at the time, which was pretty good, and we did have funding from local government or via the housing associations. Anyway, but now, we're 30 years on, those same houses are needing more upgrades because they're not as well insulated as they could be. Building standards have leapt up since then. So we're in the midst of a warm homes project that we're trying to, and they're old houses, they're old and I mean, it would be better. Well, Lucy will tell you a bit more about what we're aiming to do, but it's probably easier to build something new than it is to renovate some of these houses. But anyway, we're trying our best. We're trying to, put in insulation, put in new windows, and make them more efficient. But yes, we've got a housing shortage too, and there's still people living in caravans. Rather than leave, they're quite happy to live in a caravan rather than not at all. So that's something we've set upon. Well, that's been going on for a few years. It's hard to raise the money to do it, but we're poised on the brink of hopefully building 2 affordable houses for rent, and that'll ease it a wee bit. I mean, it's not enough, but
so just on that, if Hannah did decide, I hope you don't, Hannah, to return to Scotland and wanted to settle an Egg, how does she buy? I mean, but you can't. But would she lease land off the community trust? How does that all work? And let's say she had a bit of money to actually build a house. How does that work?
No, she can do various things. I mean, there are some houses that come on the market because at various points, different landlords have sold a house to the occupant. So I don't know, I haven't counted up recently, but let's say a third of the residential homes are owned outright. And so sometimes those come up available on the market. Now, anybody could buy those. You could buy them, Hannah, and come live with us forever. Or you could buy it as a holiday house and come from New Zealand once a year to stay in it for, a weekend. That wouldn't make you wildly popular, I have to say. But there's nothing. We can't control that part of the market. But what we can control are things like when we do build houses as a community, we can either build them in order to rent them out, like Maggie said, with the ones we're building at the moment.
Yes.
We've also got a number of house plots that we can either sell to people outright, or we can offer on a shared ownership basis where people get the land for free, but the value of the land is retained within the value of the whole property when it's complete. So the trust retains an interest in it.
Right.
And then on those we can apply what's called a rural housing burden, which means if somebody were to sell that further down the line, then they have to offer it to the community trust before they put it on the open market. So it means that, you know, there's a degree of control of ownership and the control of price in that.
And it has to be residential. It can't be a holiday home.
Can't be a holiday. Yeah.
That actually leads me on to something I wanted to ask you about the holiday homes thing. That's a really big issue that we have out here on Aotea. Something like, I might be pulling numbers here, but something like 30% of the houses here are holiday homes, and they're empty for most of the year. And I wondered if Eigg went through the same problem that I was reading about during the pandemic with like Lewis and Harris and Arran, where they were having these huge influx of people, especially from London and the south of England, coming and buying holiday homes during the pandemic. Did that happen in Eigg as well?
No.
Oh, good.
There's not that many houses to buy. I mean,
okay.
Right. Yes.
We're very small numbers, and so
Yeah.
you know, if one had been sold during the pandemic, I don't think there was. I mean,
Yeah.
no. I mean, houses come up for sale very, very infrequently, and there are some people who have them as, I suppose, what you could regard as holiday homes, i.e., they live somewhere else as well as on Eigg. But most of them, almost all of them, those houses are also offered to people as holiday accommodation. So it means that rather than them sitting empty for 51 weeks of the year and somebody using them just for 1 week of the year, they tend to be used all year round, because other families come and have their holidays in them, which means that we have a visitor economy because people come to the Eigg for their holidays. You know, people are employed to clean them and to move them around and decorate them and all that kind of thing. So, but there is obviously a balance. You know, if all houses which are in private ownership became homes owned by people who lived elsewhere and were rented out on that basis, then there wouldn't be that sense of community, because it would be very transient.
Yes.
So there is clearly a balance. So the market is something that we can't control, but I think Maggie and I would love to believe that one day somebody will give us the levers to do so. So if you have,
it'll be the women that bought their own island. If anyone can.
Yeah. I mean,
sorry, keep going.
I mean, it is that, you know. So the obvious answer is exactly that. You know, somebody says, well, if a house comes up for sale, then why doesn't the trust buy it? And as houses come up for sale, then you increase the amount of property, and that's a great idea as long as you got the money to do it.
Yes.
And again, as you can tell, I'm a big fan of the property market. When I first came to Eigg in 2004, property prices on Eigg were really low compared to everywhere else, because this was an island that had a limited ferry service, had no electricity, precious little services, and, you know, no jobs. Well, no jobs, but few, you know, by comparison to, it was a really, really hard thing to do. Now, because of the work of the trusters and others have done, we've now got a growing and thriving community with businesses and electricity and broadband and all sorts of things. And house prices have risen, you know, exponentially. So there is a slight sort of, can you tell us, I'm slightly pissed off on behalf of Maggie and all those who've put in all those years of work, in order for, I'm not begrudging people coming to live here for 1 second, but what I am begrudging is the fact that housing, you know, sales agents sort of seem to be picking a number and doubling it, and then writing flower. I hope somebody listening to this podcast Then
See, don't get me started. Do not get me started.
material to say how wonderful the island is and how marvelous the community is, and then profit on the backs of all Mike and Co.'s hard work. End of lecture.
I think we have been very lucky though, because most of the houses that have been sold have gone to people who have settled in and contribute. I mean, and I think there's only one house that's owned by somebody who doesn't rent it out as a holiday home, but they've got a quite a varied family, and they do spend a lot of time here. Yeah, but I think we are. I think we have been pretty lucky, really.
From the point of view of attracting or retaining young people like yourself, Hannah, you know, if the price of a house is beyond your reach, then I think that's my problem. But Maggie's right. The people who have moved have been great. So I'm not slapping them.
That's a problem all over Scotland. Well, all over Britain, actually.
It's over here as well. But can we talk about, let's say, what would love to hear about the impact of post buyout and these wonderful things you're doing, and you've talked a little bit about the economy, but like for instance, maybe we start about, has it attracted a new generation, or is it starting to attract a new generation, say Hannah's generation, back to the island or to the island?
Yeah, I think I mean, after the buyout, we had quite a few of our, like my daughter moved back to Eigg, and quite a few of her contemporaries, just because they saw what was going on and found it exciting and decided to move back. And we've been pretty lucky. Another sort of thread of the whole thing is volunteers. We get volunteers here through either the Scottish Wildlife Trust or the Trust itself. And we've had quite a few of those volunteers who've ended up staying and fell in love and had babies.
And then they don't go anywhere for a while.
Do you mean people, so they're off island, but they're coming to volunteer to do what in construction? What kind of volunteerism do you see?
No, it's mainly environmental work.
Tell us more. Tell us more okay. So there's
the Scottish Wildlife Trust has a ranger here, and they have volunteers all summer. Doing bird counts, flower counts, clearing paths, all that kind of thing.
Interesting. And so tell us about what the impact on tourism.
The impact tourism has on Eigg.
Or has it increased tourism? I think you talked about visitor numbers, Lucy.
Yeah. No, tourism is, I don't know how many visitors you got when you first arrived, Maggie, but I imagine they were fairly rare beasts.
But not many.
Since I've been here since 2004, the numbers have, if not doubled, then tripled in terms of people coming both for day trips, but also for overnight stays as well. It was clearly, like everywhere, there was a bit of a dip during COVID when nobody came at all, which was lovely. We had a nice, very quiet summer. And it's great having visitors because, it's fantastic for the economy, but it's also great to see all these new faces coming and going and, being part in events and
thins us out a bit.
Yes, meeting people and I mean, it can feel very, very busy and you end up sort of chasing your tail quite a bit, especially if something goes wrong, like the weather stops the ferry going and everything's a bit chaotic trying to work out who's supposed to be where. Everybody's in the wrong place at the wrong day, and but generally, I think it's a force for good. It's a real force for good. Now, although I imagine there will be some people in Eigg who would prefer it to be a bit quieter because in the middle of summer it can feel very, very busy, especially down at Lamrig and by the pier. On the other hand, because our visitors come on a ferry which has a limited number of spaces on it, we kind of know what the maximum is likely to feel. And
Yeah, we've got a minimum number of beds as well. You know, not a huge amount of beds, so it does sort of regulate itself in some ways.
Yes.
Yeah. So one of the problems on mainland Scotland, for example, is there's a lot of camper vans and people sort of, you know, just moving around in camper vans and moving around generally, and it's incredibly busy. And some small communities, particularly those which are in beautiful places where the camper vans come in and you know visit, can feel a bit sort of, you know, it's out with their control, and they've got no way of stopping these things. Well, I mean, we're kind of the same. We can't stop people getting on the ferry in Malik and coming here, but like Maggie says, there is only so many places where they can physically sleep and eat, and there is so many places on the ferry. So
And cars are not allowed to come. Yeah. Only residents' cars and contractors' cars.
Oh, that's interesting.
The roads are owned but are managed by the Highland Council, and they were quite happy for us to. They've put a traffic order on the whole thing, basically. So that does make a big difference.
Yes.
So did that idea come from you guys? And then they were happy to go along, or?
It was an agreement between us and the Highland Council.
Yeah.
And to that end, there's a minibus service here, and one of the businesses at the pier hires out bikes and electric bikes. Right. So
and people walk.
Yeah. Can I ask, what do people actually do from employment? So when you bought the island, our understanding is there was an unemployment issue. So what's happening with employment, and what do people do?
I think, but yeah, it was pretty depressed island back before we managed to buy it. Not very many people working, not very many opportunities. But I think very few folk have got just one job.
Similar.
You know, I'm sure.
She could be described in here. It's so funny.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Tourism related.
Yeah.
There's farming. There's the trust employs a few people like myself with its admin. Then Anne Lamerick and its associated buildings need cleaning. We've leased out the shop and the tea room to local people who run it as their own businesses. So there's people working in there. There's people working in the craft shop.
Yeah.
And then there's a few kind of small businesses, like we've got a fairly recent brewery has been established. Then there's a few craft workers. We've got a woman who makes amazing Shetland lace knitting.
Right.
All kinds of different things.
Oyster farm.
Oyster farm, that's right. Basket makers.
And then there's a record label that's based on Eigg. Called Lost Map. And
then of course there's a school that employs loads of people, even though we've not got very many children.
Let's talk about the record label, then the school. I'm curious about the record label.
Well, it's run by a chap called Johnny Lynch, who's also known as Pictish Trail. That's his stage name.
Oh, is it him?
It's him. Yeah.
Oh, no way! There we go. Oh my God! I saw him at the Fringe. That's so funny. Oh my God, that was years ago. Yeah.
Pictish Trail, aka Johnny Lynch, has established a record label called Lost Map, and which I think it's got about 20 acts in it or something.
They're a lot of
very successful.
All over the world, I think, but particularly the UK, sort of indie sound. So he spends quite a lot of time sort of, running that from Eigg, but also being on tour either with his own music or with others. And he runs festivals on Eigg as well, where all the fans of all his artists come to Eigg, and that's great fun.
Hang on, where do they stay? Do they camp?
A lot of camping, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So tell us.
I mean, they're relatively small. They're not thousands of people. They're only 300 people maximum, probably, which stretches up to our limits, even at that.
I'm
really.
I'm sure.
So tell us about the school. So our understanding is that you're starting to get younger people coming, babies. So you do have a school. How big is the school roll?
We've got 10 kids in there at the minute.
Yeah. 10 and one in the nursery, and then there'll be another 2 joining the nursery next year, the year after. I can't keep track of all these small people. I know there's 10 in there, 10 in the actual school at the moment,
Right.
and 1 in the nursery. And then, and at the end of next year, 2 of the 10 will go to the high school, which is in Malik. So they go over to the mainland where they board during the week and come home at weekends.
Yeah.
And then, so they all shift up. So that's why we just learn one number and then they all move up and it all changes again. But at the moment there's 10, which is great.
A small
I always enjoy hearing the story. Sorry, Sandy.
I know. Go, Hannah. What were you saying?
Oh, it's not important. I was just going to say I always enjoy hearing the stories from my friends who grew up here, and they say you couldn't get away with anything as a kid because everyone around you knows your mum and dad. They know their number off by heart. Like you couldn't get away with anything out here. I imagine it's the same.
Pretty
Yeah.
much the same. Although my
Yeah.
son growing up was quite did manage to do a few things that he.
Oh, did he? I'm sure you heard all about it, Maggie.
Get around the rules. You know, you can't come by car, right? Can people come by boat?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Right.
People come by boat. Yeah.
So I think Emma said that you were looking at creating moorings to make it easier for people. I'm not sure what the sailing's like and the Western.
But that's one of our. I think Emma was asking, you know, what's going to happen next, and I said, well, we're always at something. There's always a plan in mind. And so one of the things we've been talking about for ages has been to create some moorings as opposed to just letting the boats that do come in, you know, put an anchor down.
Oh, yeah.
So, but we've got to do all the, you know, figuring out of what that's going to be like first.
Yeah.
And where they're going to be, how many they're going to be, how we're going to pay for it, how it's going to be run, all those big questions, which are the same questions for anything we do, you know, whether we're setting up electricity or building houses or doing a wood fuel business or refurbishing a building or whatever. It's the same questions, it's just different stuff that you're asking questions about.
So can we, like, you know, got a bit of time left, 10 minutes or so. Can we just zoom out and talk about Eigg in relation to other tiny islands in Scotland? How, is this part of a movement? Are there other islands that are similar to this that have had a community buyout? Do you contact them? Is there communication between other islands? If you can let us know.
Yeah, on all those fronts. And we've got a wonderful umbrella organisation called Community Land Scotland. So we do meet up. We've got Noida is our close neighbour, which is not an island; it's a peninsula. But there's no road in. You either have to walk in or go by boat. They had a buyout about a year after we did.
Yeah.
And they've got a lot of similar. Well, they've got lots of differences too, but they've got a lot of similarities. As in, they've got renewable energy. So they're one. The small isles, it's four small islands: Canna, Rum, Muck, and Eigg. Part of Rum is community owned. Muck's a private owner, but they live and work on the island. The farmers. The whole island's run as a farm. Canna is owned by the National Trust, but there's a big move on there to work in conjunction with the National Trust, sort of developing community projects. And there are other islands, Isle of Gear, lots of Harris and Lewis and Uist are community owned. So there is a big network, and we do speak to one another and get together when we can.
What inspires you? Have any of those other islands done anything that has inspired Eigg in any way, or are you leading the way a bit?
I think we all inspire each other because
I think so. Yeah.
I think it, because I think that I think it's a genuine case of we all inspire each other, and that's partly because I think being islanders, you tend to be, you know, resourceful, resilient, adaptable, you know, and also depending on how big your population is and where you are geographically located, more likely to say, well, I can't wait for the council or the government or whoever else to come and do this. I might as well get up and do it myself. So I think there's islanderness that we recognise in other islands.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
Entrepreneurial spirit,
yeah,
almost.
so
Yeah.
there's a familiarity, but in terms of what else has inspired us, and do we inspire other people? I would say yes, equal measure, but we're all very, very different. And woe betide, you say to any of the four small isles, oh yeah, the four small isles, you all must all be the same. We're just, different as we think we're as different as we possibly could be. We're owned differently, we're geographically different, we're topographically different, we're different numbers of people living there. All we can see is difference and huge similarities. So
we relate to that. We have another
yeah.
island. What I'm thinking about Waiheke, Hannah, which is and I think people on our island in some ways look down on Waiheke. It's like, well, that's not a real island. That's just a suburb of Auckland. It's too close to Auckland. And we are a real island. And actually,
We're a real island.
we're the real deal. And I see that actually talking to the number of islands we have on this particular initiative, there are such similarities in terms of we are the outermost island in the Higham Gulf, which is in Auckland, our largest city in New Zealand. But there is a sense of isolation and independence. And it's so simple. This is in most of the islands we've spoken to around the world, it's similar. And that feeling of we are different to any other islands in New Zealand. We really feel that as well.
I don't know whether you have the same thing. There's a sort of there's a campaign, I suppose, for want of a better word, against the word remote in Scottish Islands.
Because, oh, really?
Because I don't feel remote from anywhere. I'm at the centre of my world.
Yes.
So actually, London's the remote place because it's remote.
And for sure, I think people there are probably far lonelier than they are on our islands.
There's a woman on Jura who you should speak to, called Kirsten Gow, and she's done a study about different types of islands and how you determine their similarities or not.
Yeah.
But she defined remote as being far away from something that you love. And I thought that's perfect. That's actually what it is. So that it's only in relation to you're remote from in relation to the thing that you love and that you need. And if you've got everything you love and you need around you, then you're not remote at all.
No, that's very interesting. I haven't thought about that word remote. And actually, there is positive in the way that word's used. We had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with somebody in the island of Arranmore in Ireland. Really interesting, totally different idea in terms of their particular transformation, but it was very much about remote working and people who are, again, far away from the things they love, maybe their business or whatever, but the empowerment around the word remote and because their transformation was very much a digital one based on remote working.
Yeah, we've got quite a few remote workers here now, and that's because we've got a fantastic, and it's community owned also. It's a community interest company called HebNet that runs the broadband here, which is, in the scale of things, it's pretty cheap, and it's run locally. It's managed by local folk, and that's been a huge. Lucy, for instance, one company switched us off overnight without telling us. And Lucy actually had to go away to work because you were remote working at the time. So it's pretty important these days to have a reliable broadband system. Well, we wouldn't be speaking to you on the other side of the world right now, would we?
We wouldn't be getting the gas.
See, a lot of us who remote work on our island have Starlink at great expense, even though we have Elon Musk. We're just sort of putting a veil over Elon Musk, but we have Starlink because we need reliable internet, right? So
don't talk too loudly, Sandy. I'm on Starlink and he might cut me off. Here's you.
Yes, okay. But just on that, so you don't do Starlink, so you have a broadband.
We don't do Starlink, but when we were in Gear, for example, they were very envious of our community-run broadband company because they have Starlink.
So it's a community-run broadband company.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's for the 4 small isles and Noida and parts of South Skye.
Wow.
Well,
And it works really well. We have very little problems with it.
That's amazing.
There's there's a really good team, both practical and technical, that look after it, actually.
Well, this has been so interesting. Hannah, do you have any other final questions? Thank you for what you've just sent through, Lucy. Have you got any final questions for Maggie and Lucy?
I've just been so fascinated listening to what you're saying. Yeah, it's really inspiring to hear the story. And I have to say I'm a bit embarrassed because I hadn't really heard much about Eigg, and obviously we're from Scotland, and so when I started looking into it, I was just amazed at what you've done, and reading a little bit of the history and everything from just before the buyout. It sounded a little bit like a modern day Highland clearances. And
it felt like
the fact
that actually.
I'm sure, and so
Yeah.
it was it's
There's
really inspiring.
Mia Dresler, who lives on Eigg, has written a great book called Eigg, The Story of an Island,
Yes.
which is a brilliant book, and it sort of
I
covers
need to look that up.
history from the way back when, right up until the buyout, and it's a great.
Well, yeah, I'll need to look that up.
Well, we'll have
what
a copy for Tim, I think, of that, and also maybe
yes.
but Tim, who's a running mate on this series, he's a writer, and he's written Island Stories, which is a beautiful book. So we might do a book exchange there.
Yeah.
Come on.
So just one thing that struck me, and as this comes to a close, is through this process, it really has restored my faith in human beings and connection, because the reason we're speaking to you two, we in some way we did I think Bree did an internet search. We thought, this is an interesting island, Eigg, and we're thinking, how the hell are we going to find somebody on this island? And this is hilarious. I think, I know somebody who lives in Scotland. So I literally, about a month ago, just emailed my friend Nick, who was on holiday, saying, do you know anybody? I wanted to talk to somebody on Eigg, and it's just so interesting how it's 2 degrees of separation, and suddenly
Definitely, yeah.
My friend Nick. So thank you, Nick. I'll send him this as well. Hey, we have a thank you. We're going to send you each, and it's from our island to yours. And I hope you're gin drinkers. It's island gin.
Oh yes.
Yes. Thought you might be. But this is actually just created off grid. With solar and recycled glass. We're very big on sustainability. So we want to send you a bottle each. And look, a disclaimer, it's going to take a while to get to you. And one day when you least expect it, you will both get a bottle of gin.
Look forward to that one.
We can keep in touch, and because they are a sponsor of our podcast series.
Thank you very much.
Look, I'm
Is there
so
anyone
inspired.
making gin on Eigg?
Well, yeah.
Is anyone
making gin?
Is anyone
Not
making
yet.
gin on Eigg yet? Did
Not
you know
yet. You never know.
Scotland's the world's biggest gin exporter?
Oh, well,
Yeah.
no, I'm adding to it when I see.
Yes.
Do try ours. This has been great. I'm so inspired to go to Eigg. You will definitely be seeing stuff, and I bet Hannah next time you're home.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much. This has been really.
Thank you very much. And I'm quite fascinated by. I've been looking at the different links that you've sent to us about your island. It's fascinating.
It's the most
Program.
heaps of potential, and we sort of don't want it to change, but there are some things that could possibly improve upon, but we don't want it to change. So that's that tension. It's fine. No, it's not. So, and we don't want it to change, but this has been really inspiring, this conversation. So thank you. We'll be keeping in touch.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. So
thank you very much.
You're well.
I still can't quite get over the fact that you're just starting your day tomorrow. We're still in today, and you're in tomorrow.
Yeah, I can't get my head around that either.
You're in the future.
You're in the future.
We're in the future.
It's a whole different story. So thank you two. I'll see you later.
Take care.
Hang on.
Bye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Cheerio.
So Hannah First of all, thank you for being my running mate. You're fantastic.
Oh, thanks. It was so interesting. Thanks for inviting me.
It's just, honestly, you're great. So we'll definitely get you to be leading a few of these conversations in the future. It's been really, what we like to do after these is, what resonated with you, just while it's fresh.
Just the community spirit, just the gumption, to get out and say, all right, let's buy this thing, let's take this into our own hands, is just amazing. And it's something that I can see in our community here on Aotea. I don't know if we'd have done it quite as smoothly. I think there might have been a few more arguments, but maybe they're just not telling us about the glossing over that bit.
Of course, there are arguments, but what I've learned a lot is that's just par for the course.
Yeah, and that's part of democracy, and that's great.
Of course, yeah.
But it just fascinates me that they, that they're just like, nah, let's go out and own this thing ourselves. And I just love that spirit. It's a very, it's definitely something that Kiwis have, and it reminds me of home, of Scottish people back home. It's a can do. Number 8 wire. They'll be right.
I love the notes I've made, and at the end of our 10 interviews, we're going to do a review in terms of what we've learned, and there's some real themes coming through. I love the language around a force for good. I thought that was, the whole thing is about a force for good. There is something about, for me, the community, again, there's a community council that the residents got together. There's a partnership with the Highland Council, but there's a community council, so they're working in partnership. The community-owned land, I thought that was interesting.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating.
Land, and also raising funds to build homes for rental. Yes. So there was that was very interesting.
Yeah, it would be great to find out more about that, because I know we've got the BFC at Building a Flourishing Community Aotea Trust here. I know they're trying to do something similar with buying land and leasing it to long-term residents stuff. But I wonder if it's quite a bit harder here. I don't know. It'd be great to find out more.
I do. I think it's been really inspiring. Shared ownership as well, and also so having a partnership with a private landowner, so you still have, the community still has, I don't want to say skin in the game, because that sounds like the intention is about making money rather than actually ensuring the integrity of the island community. I thought there was something around, or definitely philanthropy, that mysterious benefactor. Love to know who that was. Maybe it was.
I still think that's Cher. I'm just gonna
say it's Cher. Okay, looking at tiny islands around the world. Something in the came up before in one of the other interviews about the community-owned broadband as well. That's interesting. As and I loved that, actually, that kind of control of visitor numbers by putting a traffic order in to say you're only allowed. I mean, that sounds pretty harsh. I'm not suggesting that we do it on Aotea, but there was something about, well, if you want to come here, you've got to come by bicycle. Right?
I was just fascinated that they were able to clearly identify a problem with maybe they had too many cars coming over, too much traffic, whatever. Maybe residents couldn't get their own vehicles on the boat. So they were able to identify their problem, work out a solution, and then work with council quite quickly, I suppose, to get that rectified. That's fascinating. I wonder how many months that would have taken them, and how many months that would take us. Not that I'm suggesting.
No, but I think the answer is
a lot of months. Yeah. What struck you the most, Sandy?
Well, actually, I mean, all of that. It was something about overall the community taking the future of the island into its own hands, right, and front-footing it, but also inviting outsiders in, like the Scottish Wildlife Trust, in a partnership model without fear.
Mm-hmm.
So a lack of actual xenophobia about anybody who doesn't come from the island, which I think is there's something in that. But anyway, it's now 8 o'clock in the morning and you need to get on with your day. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thanks for inviting me.
This has been fantastic. Have a beautiful day and I'll see you soon.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks,
Okay.
Sandy. You too.
Bye. See ya. Small Island Big Ideas wish to thank our sponsor, Island Gin, probably the world's most sustainable gin company, distilled with Manuka bush honey and bottled in recycled glass right here off-grid on Aotea Great Barrier Island.
And thanks to our partner in crime, Bree Biederman, researcher Emma Ricketts, Aotea FM, Luke Nola and friends, and the local board of Aotea Great Barrier Island's Auckland Council, and the Festival of Adult Learning.
Is there anybody else we need to thank?
Oh, probably half the island, Sandy, but...
and Georgie, let's give a shout out
my
to
daughter Georgie. The crew at Aotea FM, Linda
Absolutely.
Rowe and Renee Freeland.
Oh, and everybody from the island who's given